Hello, everybody, and welcome to GDT Live, presented by the Game Day Tarps podcast. My name is Dayton Camo. Alongside me, Colton Davies. Apologies for not being available yesterday in last night's episode. We had Johnny Lazarus on. Great episode with Johnny. Go check that out if you haven't already. Colton, sorry for leaving you behind last night, man.
It's fine. It happens. Shit happens. Don't worry about it. We got a big episode today, though. Triple header. We got a few guests coming on. We're going to start things off with Guy Flaming of the Edmonton Oil Kings. He's their color commentator. And we're going to talk all things Edmonton Oil Kings and maybe dabble a little bit into the Edmonton Oilers, depending how much time we have left. So why don't we bring Guy on and let's get talking about the Oil Kings.
Sweet. Guy, how's it going, man?
Doing fantastic. How about you guys?
Oh, not too bad. Not too bad at all.
Great. You just had my colleague Stephen Ellis on your show yesterday.
That's right.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Let's chat about the Edmonton Oil Kings. Let's chat about the upcoming season. But first, let's talk about a little bit about Blake Fiddler. Obviously, a projected first-round draft pick for this year. What did you make of Fiddler this season, and how do you see him kind of favoring in this upcoming draft?
Blake came a long way this past season. His rookie year in the league was impressive because he skates really well and he's got size. But you could tell he was still pretty raw and figuring things out. This past year, he took big steps forward. Physically, he grew a lot. I think he must have been 20, 25 pounds and grew 3 inches, something like that. I think his concept or grasp of the way he needs to play the game really came through this past season for himself. I think he took a step up the depth chart for sure. Right now, there's no question he's going to be Edmonton's top defenseman. He took on a lot more responsibility, and it was a big step forward for him. And it almost makes you wonder, okay, if he can do that in one season, what's this next one going to be like? And the one after that, he might still just be scratching the surface of what he can become. Right now, he's a right-handed defenseman with size that skates really well. That's intriguing in itself. But we'll see what the next couple of years look like for him.
I had the chance to, I work for the Kamloops Blazers as well. I had the chance to watch him when Kamloops went through Edmonton, and fantastic defenseman. Watched him a little bit at the U18s as well. Do you think his father has played a big role in just his development and how mature he is in his game?
I think it's an advantage for any kid that grows up around NHL dressing rooms and just has a natural, intuitive, this is what you have to do to be successful as a hockey player. And this is how you have to approach, off ice training and nutrition and all of those types of things that probably 30 years ago we weren't really talking about with young players. Now it's certainly, you have to be on top of all of that stuff. And so I think having a parent with that sort of a background it's just a natural advantage, I think, for kids. So yeah, they don't play the same position, but I think just having that sort of experience, and there's also something about character and leadership qualities as well that Vern Fiddler had, that clearly he's passed on to his son.
Guy, someone that I wanted to touch on really quickly from the Oil Kings that kind of sparked my interest. I saw him at the World Juniors, and I think a lot of Canadians will remember him for one goal in particular, the 4-3 goal in the quarterfinals, Adam Yeko. He kind of broke out at the World Juniors. What can you tell me about Yeko?
Big and skates pretty well. He's got a great shot. I think there's still more maturing left for him to do. Not necessarily physically, because I don't know how much bigger he can get than 6'5". He'll still fill out, and that man strength that we talk about sometimes will still come. So he'll become stronger. He'll get into probably being a bit better skater than he is. I know there are scouts. St. Louis probably wants to see him be a bit more aggressive, and maybe that comes this season as it'll be his third year in the league. I'm assuming he will be back, and I haven't any indication that that's not going to be the case. But I think he's taking on a lot more responsibility as well. He should be one of the team's leading scorers this coming season, be playing on their top line, and in all situations. I think he is a guy who probably can kill some penalties as well. But you think of him more as a shooter, and that's what we saw against Canada at the World Junior Championship for sure.
Yeah, 6'5" forward, right-hand shot. If everything works out the way it should, he should probably be one of the top scorers in the WHL next year.
Well, that might be setting the bar a little high, but he should be one of the top scorers on his team. Last year, I mean, it was Grayson Sauchin and Gavin Hodnett, and Yeko might have been fourth or fifth on the team. I think Lucas Sauchin was third on the team. But if Yeko takes the step that I'm expecting that he will, he should be in that top three of scorers. I don't have the stats in front of me from last year, but if he's a 85, 90 point guy this year, I think that the Oil Kings would be happy with that.
What kind of step do you see Joe Iginla taking this year? I know he's young. I know he's just kind of coming into the league, but there seems like there's just a lot of hype around him.
Yeah, expectations will be high for him this year. I think they were high for him last year coming in as a rookie, but unfairly so, because it's a tough league, and you're a 16-year-old player trying to be an impact guy at that age. It's hard, and he was a third, fourth line guy for the most part last season. Didn't play every game. There were nights where they had a rotation of guys playing that role. This will be different. This will be a year where they expect him to take a step forward. You go back and guys like Dylan Gunther, when he came in, he started the year as a fourth liner, ended up on the top line or in the top six because it was a first overall pick. And Joe was a high pick, not that high. But I think he was a little snake bit last year. I think maybe he expected it would be easier than it was. But I still think that he is a top prospect for the league and for the Oil Kings. And I'm intrigued to see how he does this year in his second full year.
Let's talk about your life as a broadcaster a little bit, Guy. I was doing a little bit of research. I found that you were a color commentator for the Alberta Golden Bears back in the day.
Yeah.
And myself, I just spent the last winter in the booth at University of Toronto doing color commentary and play-by-play for the Varsity Blues. So I was just wondering if you could take me and our viewers through a day in the life as a broadcaster and what that's like. Well,
the U of A Golden Bears, that was fun. First real kind of steady gig being a broadcaster. Bob Stauffer was doing play-by-play for the Golden Bears at the time. And it's you come to the rink, you got to prepare. You got to know who's on the team that you're calling. You got to know who the opposition is and some of the background. And you get to the rink and you try to talk to the coaching staff for both teams and kind of pick out some stories and some things that the coaches are looking for. And you just make notes. And you just when you have a really good play-by-play guy, all you're trying to do is fill in for him when he needs to take a breath or when, there's a stoppage in play. You're expected to jump in and add to the broadcast. And so that's always what I try to do. But what I did for the Golden Bears doesn't change. It hasn't changed for what I do now for the Oil Kings. You come to the rink, you do your prep, and you look to add to the broadcast.
Is there any moment from your broadcasting career that you look back on and was like, damn, that's a good storyline?
Good storyline. Well, I mean, the Oil Kings got to the Memorial Cup in 2014. That was my first year full-time doing Oil Kings color, and getting to travel with the team to Portland for that final. It was the third year in a row that Edmonton and Portland had met in the WHL Championship. So it's not common where you have a rival from the other conference, because you only play them once a year in the regular season, and only once every 2 years in the other team's barn. But there was a healthy rivalry between Edmonton and Portland by that point, because they'd met. That was the third year in a row. So that was a good storyline. And to win the league championship on the road in Portland in Game 7, I think it had been many years since that had happened, where the road team won Game 7. That was awesome. And then to go to London with the team and do the Memorial Cup. They had the longest game in Memorial Cup history against Val-d'Or, where they went to, I want to say it was 3 or 4 overtimes now. I can't even remember, but my broadcast partner at the time was Corey Graham, and he did an awesome job. Really exciting call. Curtis Lazar with a redirection at the top of the slot that ended that game. And then they had to get ready and play 2 days later against the Guelph Storm in the Memorial Cup Championship, and they were able to pull that one off. But it was a really fun event, and I still think the Memorial Cup was awesome, but second best to winning the WHL title.
Well, you talked about the Memorial Cup for a little bit. How important is the Memorial Cup to the CHL?
Well, of course it's important, but I always the analogy I like to use is winning your league title. It's like having the best meal that you can imagine. Like, you think of what your death row meal would be, your last meal. You know, maybe you're a steak guy and you just have like prime rib and mashed potatoes and everything you could dream of. It's absolutely fantastic. Winning a league title. The Memorial Cup is like the best dessert that you can imagine. You could have dessert, and I mean, you can be satisfied with the steak meal, and then you have the dessert, and you'd be like, that was great too, but it's not as good as the steak, right? I mean, you're never happy with the dessert as much as the main course. So for me, the Memorial Cup is great, but it's the league championship is more important, more satisfying, because you have a rivalry. I mean, against Portland, there was lots of emotion. Edmonton against Val-d'Or, Edmonton against Guelph. I mean, great, because they're all league champions, but there's no history there. There's no rivalry, so a lot less emotional.
Yeah,
that rivalry between Portland was something that I distinctly remember. I was like 15 and 16 at the time. I remember watching it. I mean, like Henrik Samuelsson was such a horse for the Oil Kings. Yeah. Mitch Moroz was one of my favorite players. That team was just electric. And I think that team, like that 2013-14 team, was probably one of the better WHL championship rosters that I think we've seen in maybe the last decade or so. But I really look back at some of those guys like Lazar and Samuelsson and Moroz and what they were able to do for that team and how good they were. That's just a big memory for me from back then.
Well, Griffin Reinhart didn't have the NHL success that I think anybody expected that he would, because in the WHL, he was a beast. Like, he could do anything on the ice. He was a man amongst boys and dominated for the Oil Kings in his 2 or 3 years that he played. They had Tristan Jarry in that, who has gone on to have NHL success. Probably as much success as anybody else the Oil Kings have produced since they came back into the league in 2007. It was a really good team. I might argue that the team in 2022 that won the league title might have been better because, I mean, Sebastian Kosa was a really good goaltender. They had guys like Caden Gooley on the blue line, and Jake Neighbors and John Gunther up front, and Prokop as well, and Justin Sordev. So that they probably had a deeper team in 2022.
That team was, just thinking back now, that team was also just crazy good. We've had a few guys on. We had Jackson Smith on a couple days ago, and he talked about his commitment to Penn State. Can you kind of shine some light as a broadcaster what your thoughts are on the whole CHL NCAA debacle that's gone on?
Debacle. That's a good word. It's going to take some getting used to, isn't it? It's I do this a little show called The Pipeline Show that's been around since 2006. Thank you for that. So I've been following not just the WHL, but across the CHL and into the States. I'm a big college hockey guy. It's great. And the USHL is another league that I cover. So I'm familiar with all the avenues to get to professional hockey that there have been. And there's always been the CHL path or the college path. And now they've come together, not quite overlapping yet, but it's going to take some getting used to see. My greatest fear when all of this was that the CHL would turn into the USHL, and the difference has always been the USHL's mandate has been to get guys to college hockey. Some of those guys will go on and play pro, and some of them will get to the NHL, and that's great. But job number one in the USHL is to get guys NCAA scholarships. the number one job for the CHL is to get guys pro contracts. There's always been guys who, of course, go on and play in the NHL. Other guys play in the American Hockey League or in the ECHL or go to Europe and play professionally. And those are all CHL success stories as well. And if that doesn't work out, then there's the education package, which has always been fantastic, doesn't get enough recognition and credit. I mean, we're talking about CIS or U Sports, probably the greatest secret in hockey in this country is the quality of U Sports hockey. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's always been the difference between the two paths is, the CHL is to prepare you for pro hockey and the USHL is to prepare you for college. Now, what we're seeing is that some guys will go the college route out of the CHL. And I always thought, naively, I thought and hoped that it would be the 20-year-olds after they're done, their eligibility is up, then they'll either choose the U of A Golden Bears or the University of North Dakota. And that's great. But for some reason, I thought there would be, I don't want to say loyalty, but I thought there might be less of guys leaving early. And clearly that's not going to be the case. And I don't like it, to be honest with you, but I understand it. And we want the players to have the choice. It's great for the players. It's great for college hockey. It will be okay for the CHL because you're going to get a lot of younger players who otherwise wouldn't have come, and that's great. But I would rather have a 19-year-old Cole Reshny than a 16-year-old Cole Reshny because he's just better, and the league is better because of it. Yeah. And the other Victoria Royals benefit from a 19-year-old Cole Reshny more than a 16-year-old Cole Reshny. So I think the league will adapt and change, and it will still be the best junior league out there, but it will be different, and it will take some getting used to.
We kind of talked about that, like how, Eli McCamey commits to go to play for Victoria, and then 2 days later, 3 days later, Reshny and Verhoff announced they're going to UND. And it's just like, what does that do? We had Adam Kierzenblot on, who covers the WHL for the Hockey News, and he talked about just like what that does to the Victoria Royals fan base, because they've been, desperately looking for this playoff run. They finally have this team at their hands that can be good, and now Reshny and Verhoff, leave, and ultimately it's for their own sake and their own growth of their career. But I see that as like that hurts Victoria fans, of course.
Yes, if you're a fan of the Royals, that was probably a punch in the gut for sure. You would have to think the Royals managing, the organization. I'm not sure if they're caught off guard, but Keaton Verhoff only played a year. 2 years ago, if he wanted to go to college, he could have committed and played in the BCHL last year or something like that. But he chose the CHL. A year later, that's changed. And, for me, I was like, well, that kind of surprised me. So I'm sure, I'm guessing it probably surprised the organization as well. That's a big loss. I think that's a bigger loss for the WHL and for the CHL, even more so than Reshny, but because it's going to be his draft year next year. So, instead of a guy being drafted out of the WHL, it'll be a college guy in Verhoff. So that's a surprise. I'm sure Royals fans are disappointed. Interesting that it's James Patrick, and former North Dakota player himself, that he loses a couple of guys to his alma mater. But at the same time, you got Eli McCamey coming in, so that's the trade-off. You're losing Cole Reshny, but you're gaining Eli McCamey. But I would rather have Reshny, if I'm a Royals fan, because you're gearing up to become a contender. You have a better chance of winning with a 19-year-old or an 18, 19-year-old Cole Reshny than you do a rookie coming in as a 16, 17-year-old. Even if he's really, really good, your chances of winning are better with a vet. So that's going to take some getting used to. I think teams will probably, most teams will have to go through that. I think there will be some teams maybe insulated from it a little bit more than others. Certainly the small market teams are, I think, going to feel it more. And depending on like quality of rink and the facilities and the training facilities and things like that, there might be some teams who have a bit of an advantage. The Oil Kings might have more of an advantage to keeping some guys than other teams, because they obviously play in one of the nicest and newest NHL rinks and all the facilities and amenities that go along with that. But I'm sure that it'll happen for them too.
Oh, I think my mic was muted for a sec there. Okay. We have a question from the chat. Big Willie Styles wants to know what your favorite NCAA team is, if you have one.
I don't really have one. It kind of changes. I've always been more of a guy who cheers for individual players. And so if there's a player that I like on a certain team, then I'll focus on that team a little bit more. It's also because of the Pipeline Show. Maybe I have a relationship with a coach or something. Like when Dave Haxtell was coaching for North Dakota, I followed them. Dylan Simpson, who grew up in this area, he's Craig Simpson's kid. He played at North Dakota. And Haxtell, I had him on the show. He's from the Edmonton area as well, Dave Haxtell. So in the off season, he came into studio when the show was on TSN 1260 in Edmonton, and just sat in with us for an hour. And we used to do that a lot in the off season. So we kind of get more of a personal one-on-one relationship with some of these guys. And when he was here, he said, if you've ever been to North Dakota, come down and do your show from our rink. And I took him up on that. I went down and did the show from the Ralph. Unbelievable building, by the way. If you've never been to the arena in Grand Forks, fantastic. It's about 11,000 seat capacity, but it's full all the time. And it's outside of an NHL rink, and maybe better than some NHL rinks. It was pretty amazing. So North Dakota's got one of those teams that I like to follow. I mean, Denver's really good, and they always have lots of Alberta guys on, and lots of Canadians. Guy Godowski is at Penn State. He's the head coach. Yeah. He's from Edmonton, so bit of a connection there as well. So definitely some programs that I look to and follow more closely than others. Those are three.
Since we're on the topic of NCAA, Guy, I wanted to bring this up. Someone left a comment on our Twitter from our episode with James Tubb, the Medicine Hat Tigers reporter.
Right.
And he said, I like how you guys don't see the Whitehorse game as the emotional blackmail it is. The WHL needs McKenna more than McKenna needs the WHL. What do you make of that tweet? Because I thought that was crazy.
It really, when they announced that game, that's the first thing I think most people thought of was, they're really trying to keep Gavin McKenna in the league.
Yep.
And I don't know. I don't think it's going to work. I don't know if that alone is enough to keep him in the WHL. I mean, I hope he stays. It would be great for the league. I'm not expecting it at this point. When the Memorial Cup was awarded to Kelowna, I think everyone's initial reaction was, wow, you just lost Gavin McKenna. And I don't think anything's happened since that's changed my mind. Now, if Medicine Hat was hosting, would that be enough to keep McKenna? I actually think it might have been. Yeah. Even now that they got there and they got as close as they did, you can make the argument, okay, well, they've done that. And you look at the season he had, what's left in this league for him. Well, winning a Memorial Cup is what's left. And if they were hosting, that might be enough to keep him. And Ryder Ritchie and maybe Caden Lindstrom would have come back as well. Yeah. And not having that, now Ritchie's gone, Lindstrom's gone. They've obviously aged out some guys. Yeah, I don't think he's going to come back. And I don't know that the Whitehorse exhibition weekend is going to be enough of an enticement to keep him. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't think so at all. I agree with you. Like we just touched on, I think Menigan is also aged out as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a huge piece right there. And Ritchie as well going to the NCAA. So all those things, he's just better off, I think, for his development to go to the NCAA.
Well, I mean, that's you can argue it both ways. Okay, let's say he goes to, well, doesn't matter really which school he goes to. He's going to play maximum like 40, 41 games. He's going to play double that in the Western Hockey League, assuming that the Tigers would end up going far in the playoffs. I mean, when the Oil Kings won it in 2014, I did the math. There were guys on that team that played 100 games, including preseason and regular season and playoffs. I mean, you can't come anywhere close to that in the NCAA. So if you're one who believes that games are what help you get better, then you want the CHL and the travel, and you get used to more of a pro schedule. For other guys, it's less games, more time in the weight room, more time practicing, and that's an argument, a valid argument as well. Some guys do benefit more from that. It's not going to make any difference for Gavin McKenna's draft stock for next year. He's going number one, whether he plays in Medicine Hat or Michigan or insert team here. That's not going to change anything. So, I don't know, pick your poison. Either way, Gavin McKenna's going number one.
Yeah, I don't think that changes at all, for sure.
Guy, one more before we let you go. Let's touch a little bit on the Edmonton Oilers. We just want your opinion. What is one thing the Oilers need to tackle in the offseason?
I think their defense has to get better. Let me say straight out, I'm not an Oiler guy. That's not my team. They happen to be in the city that I am in. So I wasn't emotionally attached to this group. I was cheering for them for the fan base, because I know this fan base would be, they've suffered through some really dark years with the Edmonton Oilers over the years. They need some more support. They need wingers for Leon Draisaitl, so they don't always have to put Draisaitl and McDavid together, because that really dilutes the rest of their forward group when they have to do that. Evan Bouchard is so good offensively, but he is so bad defensively. My opinion, that I almost wonder if his greatest value to the organization might be in trade, because they have very few prospects in their pipeline outside of Savoy and maybe Sam O'Reilly with the London Knights. There's not a whole lot, and they've got no draft picks for this year. They don't have a first, second, or a fourth, I believe, this year.
Yeah.
And they don't have a first next year either. So they've got nothing really coming. They signed a bunch of guys out of Europe to hopefully plug some holes for them, but those so rarely work out. I think they got to find some stability in goal. There's a lot of areas I think they can improve on. Yet they got to the finals 2 years in a row. They're not that far away. I think the Florida Panthers is just the class of the league, though. And I don't know that anybody could have beat Florida this year. And the scary thing is Florida's core is signed long-term. Like they could be intact together. They could sign Sam Bennett and find money for Ekblad and have those guys back with everybody else probably for the next 3 or 4 years. So Florida's not going anywhere.
Well, Guy, just one more quick one from me
Sure.
before we let you go. I got a notification on my phone about 5 minutes ago. It said from Beecher Report, Connor McDavid will need to do, in quotes, what's best for my family after Stanley Cup final loss. And then in another one, when he was asked about contract talks, he said, no rush. What do you think about that? Do you think this is kind of an indication that he might leave, or is this just Canadian media doing Canadian media things?
Yeah, I think the latter. Leon Draisaitl is here. He's signed for 8 years, I believe. They're tight. They're buddies. And I would be surprised. If you're Connor McDavid and you're saying, okay, where can I go to have a good chance of winning? Your team just got to the final twice. It got to Game 7 last year. Where is a better? You're not going to Florida. They can't afford you. Other than Florida, where's the best chance you have of winning? It's in Edmonton. So I don't expect he's going anywhere. But of course, the question has to be asked, because especially if it's coming out of Toronto, everything circles back to the Leafs somehow. No, I think that's just what you get this time of year when a guy is entering the final year of his deal. But I don't expect Connor McDavid is going anywhere.
Yeah, if I was Connor McDavid, I wouldn't leave my heated driveway either. But that's not for me to say. Guy, it's been a great show. Thank you for joining us. We'll definitely have to have you back on sometime in the future.
My pleasure, guys. See ya. Thanks for the invite.
Take care.
Yeah, have a great day, Guy.
All right, Colton.
All right.
Before we bring on Chase, just want to touch on one thing. The Oilers, I don't know if they're going to be getting back to that Stanley Cup final anytime soon. I listened to Morning Cup of Hockey this morning, and it's just, I don't know if it's in them. I just got to put it out there.
Interesting argument between Colby and Tyler about the Oilers not making it back. I thought that was pretty funny. it's hard for me to look at that Oilers team and not think they'd get back, but you know what? Whatever. Let's get to some NCAA talk. Let's bring on Chase Fisher from the Daily Collegian, covers the Penn State men's hockey team, and let's bring him on, Dave.
Chase, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
Oh, not a problem, man. It's our pleasure.
Let's we just had Jackson Smith on a couple days ago. He could not gush more about the Pagula Arena and Penn State. What do you make of the commitment from a top 10 projected NHL draft pick?
Yeah, this is obviously a monumental commitment for Penn State. The biggest commitment they've ever gotten from a player. This is huge. And it's, not just him. They're getting rumored to like Gavin McKenna, Porter Martone. This is definitely a monumental commitment. And, that defense core, it was pretty small last year. They weren't that physical. And, you had Jackson Smith, who's 6'3". They're adding a few other CHLers. This is huge for Penn State. And I'm sure their odds for a national championship are obviously skyrocketing after that.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you make of go ahead, Dave.
Oh, no, I was just going to say there's lots of stuff around Penn State, around the campus. It's not too far from Pittsburgh. What does the campus there have to offer to players that kind of might attract them a little bit more than other schools?
I mean, it's really in the middle of nowhere, but I just had a interview with Charlie Serrato, who was one of the key factors last year in the Frozen Four run, and he committed to Michigan in 2021 before flipping to Penn State. And I asked him, what was the big deal? Why did you flip your commitment? It was like the facilities and how they treat their players is really number one for him. And obviously the coaching staff is really good at, what they do. So like the campus really is in the middle of nowhere, but the sports fans there, sports is number one at Penn State. Obviously with like football and wrestling, and hockey's now coming into that number three. Penn State has this like student section called the Roar Zone, and they get into it. They travel to St. Louis for the Frozen Four. They really back their team. So it's really an attractive destination for these top prospects.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to touch on, actually. You brought up the student section. I didn't actually know if they had any antics that they did. I know Maine, they have the Naked Five. They have those 5 guys that paint Maine on their chest and run around with their shirts off. Or in North Dakota, all the students line up and they sprint inside to the seats. Does Penn State's student section do anything kind of like that in particular?
They have like chants throughout the games, but like when a goal is scored, they do like a chant. They say like the goalie's name, and then like scream "You suck," and then like all this like chanting. It gets electric in Pagula.
Yeah, let's talk about probably a hard atmosphere to play in.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about the Frozen Four. Last year, what was that like for you covering the team in a big moment like that?
So it was really fun. Obviously, they started 0-8 in conference play through December. I think they were like 40th or 50th in pairwise. They were really low. They had maybe like a sub 5% chance of even making the tournament, let alone, making a run in the tournament. So it was really fun to watch. It was really like the whole first half of the year, they got production from their top line, Aiden Fink, who's a Predators prospect, Reese Lawback, Sharks prospect, and then Dan Geniev, who graduated. But like the emergence of the second line, it was Charlie Serrato, JJ Weebush, and Matt DeMarsco really like skyrocketed them and helped them with this like a season comeback. It was really fun to watch. They're a group that really like loved each other. You could tell like Penn State, a lot of people, when people think about Penn State, they think about culture, and you can tell the culture of the hockey team is really good. And it was just fun watching how the fans back them up. Like obviously, even when they're bad, the fans, Pagula was sold out a lot of times this year. They set attendance records like 3 or 4 times this year. So it was really fun to watch how the fans back them as well.
Yeah, no, I think I was curious about Jimmy Dowd because I grew up watching his dad, and I'm sure, I don't know if he's before your guys' time, but I grew up watching his dad, and what a legend his dad was. What is a younger Jimmy Dowd like for Penn State?
This was my first year actually covering the team, but I wrote a feature on Jimmy Dowd back in like November. He is, when you think of like just the nicest guy, if someone said like who is the nicest guy you've ever met, like Jimmy Dowd, honestly, like he's up there. he's such a great guy. People look up to him in the locker room. He was the alternate captain this year. He really sets the culture, and just everyone loves him,
What about Arseny Sergeyev? So the goaltender, Calgary Flames prospect, kind of took the NCAA by storm this year, just in the terms of how he was, or last year, sorry, just in terms of how he was able to play. What do you make of him? Because he seems like he's got some NHL potential.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a Penn State team who's got like Aiden Fink, who was one of the leaders. I think he led the Big Ten in points per game last year. You got Aiden, Sarcerado, all these guys. Like the X factor to that team was Arseny Sergeyev. They're like 5-4, I think, or 4-3, and then Sergeyev went down with an injury in November against Wisconsin, and he was out through December. He came back like the first week of January, and I think they were like 2-6 in that span. Goals were going through like crazy. He is legit. He's the real deal. I think he definitely has some pro potential.
Chase, you covered the Penn State men's hockey team for the Daily Collegian, but you're also a student at Penn State. How do you balance your education, but also covering this men's hockey team in depth?
So funny thing, I'm actually a finance major, and I'm minoring in journalism. So, I have to tackle like doing business stuff and all that. But writing is really my number one priority at school. I know a lot of people say, business school is like you're coloring for homework and all that stuff. So I really spend most of my time thinking about writing and covering the team. So it's really not that hard. It's so fun though. Covering the team, this is probably the best year of my life. It's just so exciting being around a team, especially a team that, went to the Frozen Four. I was able to travel to Allentown for the regionals and then St. Louis for the Frozen Four, and it was just a blast.
Are you surprised at like how well fans kind of traveled to St. Louis? I know there was a talk about like, the Frozen Fours in St. Louis, they're not going to get any viewership. And then I tuned into that Frozen Four championship game, and Western Mich had tons of players there, and every school that was in that tournament had players come or had fans coming.
Like how the Penn State fans traveled, or like just in general?
Just in general.
Okay, yeah. Well, every single game there, you could hear the Western Michigan fans. They were insane. I think in the national championship, they were at least like 60-70% of the capacity of the arena. It was absolutely nuts. Like leading up to the games, like we went to dinner, so many North Dakota fans were there. It's really neat just seeing all the like different types of fans. You saw like Colorado College was there, like all these like crazy schools. But Penn State had a pretty solid turnout as well. Like I said, like some of the War Zone traveled there, so like they had like 20 to 30 students just make the trip. The atmosphere was just amazing there, especially during the championship. Western Michigan fans really get into it. It's crazy.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like a pretty sick atmosphere. Now you get to cover a lot of games. I would assume you get to see a lot of like great players come into Pegula. Who was the best or the most interesting player that you saw come in this season?
Whew, that is a great question.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, but
Jimmy Snuggerud, probably. I would say he's insane. He really like controls the ice when he plays. Like his puck is a puck control, and he was just a threat anytime he had the puck in the offensive zone. He was pretty special to watch. And then obviously Isaac Howard, but I'd say Jimmy Snuggerud.
Yeah, I watched Snuggerud in Halifax at the World Juniors in 2023, and I think one of the most underrated parts of his game is definitely his shot. Would you say that?
Yeah, I would say that. I also think he plays like he plays like he's not, what was he, like 22? He plays like a like mature player. Like he doesn't not that many turnovers in his game. He's definitely, the Blues got a special player in him.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons that like these CHL players are coming to the NCAA. Like Jimmy Snuggerud, he's been in the NCAA for the past couple of years, and he's already developed into what you said, a mature player. So I think the NCAA is definitely the premier route for maturing and developing your game in that sense.
I definitely agree. I mean, I feel like one of the big parts is they're now facing, all these CHL players are coming, they're facing like 22, 23-year-olds. So it's a lot more physical of a game. It'll help them like develop like with the physical aspect that they're going to face in the National Hockey League. Obviously, it's not the same exactly, but it's definitely a step up, in my opinion, from like the WHL and the OHL and all that.
And obviously the seasons are kind of shorter in the NCAA, but Guy Fleming, the guy we just had on, the Edmonton Oil Kings play-by-play broadcaster, he said that the off-ice stuff and the practicing and the shorter schedules in the NCAA might be more intriguing to players than playing a full season, and getting that extra work to yourself might be more beneficial. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. More time for recovery too. So, they play Fridays and Saturdays usually every week, and then they have 2 or 3 bye weeks during the season. So a lot more recovery. You're going to get your best out of them every single game. So I would definitely agree with that. Yes, and then in the off season they all train together. Like I know Charlie Serrato and Matt DeMarsco are going up to State College to train together, and they're like holding camps and stuff like that. So I definitely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, I would say, the best route for players, especially undersized ones, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Colton, you are muted, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. Muted. All right. My turn. So you got a player coming to Penn State next year that I'm very familiar with, and that's Shea Van Olm. He played for the Kamloops Blazers. I worked for the Kamloops Blazers as well. Got to see him for a year and a half. Fantastic player. Just tore up the WHL this past season. What do you make of the roster next year? Lev Katzon's coming. Luke Misa's coming, obviously, as well. I saw that Guy Godowski's son is playing for the team, too. I thought that was awesome. What do you make of the roster for next season?
I think they're going to be a top 3 national championship contender for sure. You talk about Shea Van Olm. I feel he's like the perfect fit to this Penn State team. You're going to put him on the first line with Aiden Fink and Reese Lawback. Van Olm, I didn't watch a lot of his tape, but I know he's a guy. He makes his living net front, gets a lot of goals right in front of the goaltender. And you go on a line with like Aiden Fink, who just shoots the puck at the goal, and Reese Lawback as well. That's a perfect fit. And then obviously bringing in Matt Godowski, who was a top 10 Hobie Baker finalist. He's an offensive oriented defenseman, and Penn State really didn't really generate any offense out of their defensemen last year. So him and Jackson Smith coming in is going to be pretty special. I know Guy Godowski has been looking for a long time for a quarterback to his first power play unit, and Jackson Smith will definitely be that guy for their first one, and Matt Godowski for the second one. They seem to have it all. They have excellent defense. They're excellent skating. Last year they were really good in transition. So they really seem to have it all this year. And then they bring in Kevin Riedler, who was a really good goaltender. He was a backup at Omaha last year. He was a 5th or 6th, I think 5th round draft pick of the Ottawa Senators a few years ago. He's really good. They're going to be really good next year. It's going to be exciting to watch.
Do you think the team has it in them to get back to the Frozen Four? Like, I think so, just on paper.
Well, just look at the names you just listed off.
That's what I'm saying, though. That's what I'm saying. Like, stupid question by me, but like,
no, I think so for sure.
No doubt. I don't think they're done either. They're in these rumors for Gavin McKenna, Michael Misa. If Michael Misa gets drafted, and the team that drafts him wants to develop another year, like I would find it hard to believe that he wouldn't have Penn State as his number one destination, And then Martone was teammates with Luke Misa, who's also on Penn State next year. And then obviously, Gavin McKenna has been rumored to Penn State. Elliot Friedman had them as his favorite. So I don't think they're going to be done, in my opinion. I wrote a story about how NIL is changing college hockey, and I think like Big Ten is just going to take over college hockey, with all the NIL and stuff. And I think Penn State's going to be at the forefront of that.
Oh,
well, Chase,
exciting.
It was a great episode today. Thank you for tuning in. We'd love to have you come back on anytime throughout the season. So thanks for coming on, and have a great day, man.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. I'd gladly come back. This was a blast. Thank you.
All right.
Awesome.
Take care, man.
Well, maybe once the big news drops, we'll get you back on.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. Awesome.
Okay. Sounds good, man.
All right, Colton, before we bring Tyler on, man, what a wagon that Penn State team is going to be next year, eh?
I'm scared. Yeah.
Well,
that's all I have to say.
Why don't we bring in Tyler? Welcome in, Tyler. How's it going?
Good, guys. Good. Love jumping on and love talking about how good Penn State's going to be, even though my Western Michigan Broncos are the ones that won the national championship this year. Just letting everyone know that, just trying to keep those Penn State folks to themselves for a minute.
Yeah, we did touch on Western Michigan there too. We did touch on how well their fans traveled. Oh man, they were loud in there. Apparently, Chase was telling us.
It's they travel super well, and we have the Lawson Lunatics down there in Kalamazoo, and they ponied up the athletic department ponied up a lot of bucks to make sure they can get the students down there to give a little bit of life in that building for sure.
Well, Tyler, it's no surprise. There's been some expansion in the PWHL. That's what we're here to talk about today. How big is this for the league? It's obviously only the third season, and now there's 2 more teams.
You know, this was brewing week 2 of the inaugural season. We saw the great coverage the league was getting and the great play, the great action, the fact that we had a best on best professional league in North America was huge. And I remember going to cover the game in Detroit for Daily Faceoff, and we talked to Jana Hefford and everyone. And this was not just myself being the women's hockey writer. This was local Detroit writers, Detroit media asking, so when you bring in a team here? And Jana was like, this is year 1, guys. How do you expect us to have a brand new league and then expand right away? I mean, I guess you can look at the history of the NHL and how they would expand, but then cut teams and all that stuff. And it's been very strategic. And Amy Shearer, the executive vice president of business ops for the league, has been very prevalent in saying that this is a multi-year process. This was kind of planned that if they were going to kind of see how things started off, and then they would look at expansion. And then the way the league just took off in year 1 without nicknames, without, unique logos, they said, all right, we got to jump on this here. So that kind of started the ball rolling for 2 new teams. And I think there's still a bunch of markets that still want to have teams. And I think the league is still pursuing, but Vancouver and Seattle were definitely at the forefront because you could tell the league really wanted to jump on, They wanted to have a coast to coast footprint. And yeah, I see that comment. They really wanted Calgary to have a team. That was another pick of mine, Calgary, because the Canadian women's program has been ran so much out of Calgary. They're training there when they have the Olympic cycles. The whole team would travel to Calgary and stay there and train and get ready for the Olympics. So I'm not knocking Calgary yet, but getting Vancouver was important to see how, and now that they're going to have their own rink, they're taking over the old Coliseum. They got their own practice facility, something that the other 7 teams in the PWHL do not have to themselves. In Seattle, the way they've turned out and drove for women's hockey, not just with the takeover tour last year, but also they hold the record for the biggest attendance for a women's hockey game in the U.S., pro or international, when they had the rivalry series there back, and I think it was in November, December 2022 when U.S. and Canada played, which that always draws a big crowd. So, I mean, it's great to see the league expand its footprint like this. And as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, there are going to be some pretty good teams out there.
Well, let's talk about the expansion draft here for a couple seconds. Boston, they did something I didn't expect to do. They left Hillary Knight on the board, and of course, she got taken. And another fan favorite, Lexia Gia, she also signed in Seattle. So there's a couple of things there to look at. And what do you make of that?
Well, Hillary Knight, that was rumored for weeks on end. I unfortunately, when it was first announced about the expansion draft, I'm like, well, don't worry, Hillary Knight will get protected, right? She's one of the best players ever and an easy marketable figure. But as soon as I wrote that and I got it posted, about a couple days later, I saw, well, Hillary Knight might not get protected. I'm like, well, it makes sense. She's 34 years old, and I know that might not sound old to some people, but she's been playing for the national team for well over a decade. She's the most decorated player in women's world championship history for a reason. And she's still good though. I think maybe that's the confusing part. She's a candidate, a finalist for the MVP once again, after finishing tied for the league in points. But I think Danielle Marmer realizes that even though Hillary Knight had a much better year compared to year 1 of the league, that she needs to get maybe a little bit younger, because obviously it didn't work with Hillary Knight, or at least team-wise it didn't work out, right, just because of the fact that the team missed the playoffs. that she wanted to go younger. She really liked Alina Mueller. Megan Keller is such an important player on the back end that they had to protect. And they have probably right now, in my estimation, I know Canadian fans are going to hate to hear me say this, but Erin Frankel is the best goalie in the world right now. And they would have solely made the playoffs based on her play alone. So given the fact that they were only able to protect 3 players right off the hop, Hillary Knight being left wide open, the way she's spoken glowingly about Seattle, whether it be through the takeover tour, the rivalry series, it seemed like it was a match made in heaven. So I'm not shocked. And I know Alexia Gia is a fun one. She's one of those spirited, hard-nosed players, and I think she'll do great things in Seattle. And she showed that in Ottawa, showed that in Boston. She was a fan favorite in Boston, but that's the business of the game, man. And we've seen a lot of players just that we thought, hey, they were good with this team. Oh, whoops, they're signing a 2-year contract elsewhere. It's same thing in the NHL, and it's kind of a good thing to see it in the women's game too, because now we're seeing the business side of the game kind of start to take relevance here, and you're now the second true offseason in the league.
Yeah, well, Colton flashed up a question here from Bill Beck. Is she going to keep playing after she retires from the national team? Do you see that happening?
So she's spoken that it's for the it's not necessarily for the Olympics, it's just for the Olympics, because that's a whole 4 more years, right? Like that's back in the day, especially in the early days of both the U.S. and Canadian national programs, and when yes, they were having world championships every year starting in 99 there, but it's a long process to try to stay relevant enough, because we've seen good players go from being an Olympian, being an important part of an Olympic team, to not playing anymore. Tessa Bonhomme, everyone knows her from TSN and right now the Jocks and Jills podcast. She played on one Olympic team. That's because it's so hard to stay that good for so long. You look at the NHL. How many guys can be on the Canadian national team, on the Olympic team 1 year, and then 4 years from there, they could have fallen off the face of the earth, right? That's in a way unique. So going back to Hillary Knight, I just think she realizes that she'll be 35 years old at the Olympics next year in Italy. How is she going to be? I know, yes, Salt Lake City's coming up, but that's just a hard ask for someone to be good for another 8 years on top of it. There's so few players that can play that well, that long into their 40s and still be one of the best players in their country. So I think for her to kind of realize that and kind of allow maybe a passing of the torch, I think that's good to see. I think she'll still play a couple more years, couple more world championships, but it's good to see that there's going to be a nice change in the guard. But Hillary Knight's one of the best, and I don't think trying to stick it out for 4 more years is going to change that,
Talking about the national team, let's switch to the Canadian national team for a second. And they had a pretty important player also from the Toronto Scepters head to Vancouver. How big is this for Vancouver to get Sarah Nurse, such a big face in women's hockey, here in their arena, in their team?
With that, it wasn't officially their first signing. I know that would have been Claire Thompson and Sophie Jakes from the Minnesota Frost. But Sarah Nurse, you can argue whether she's one of the 3 best players in the game right now, but she's the most marketable. There's so many people in Toronto that are mad that she's gone, not just because how great of a player she is, but just the type of personality that she is. And when she met with the media after she signed with the team, she spoke very happy. She spoke very glowingly about Toronto. That's kind of her home, and she realizes that, but she wanted to try something different, right? Because that came during the exclusive signing period for Seattle and Vancouver. This wasn't Hillary Knight and Nurse just getting their names called and oh crap, we have to go across the country. This was, I want to go here. I want to sign here. So you could tell Nurse was really interested to go on for a new challenge. And as we've seen with this team, she was on a really great Scepters team beforehand. She's, I could argue right now, on an even better team in Vancouver. And she is the number 1 player right now. And I think with all the pieces that Kara Gardner-Murray has put around her so far, I think you're going to see maybe the best Sarah Nurse you've seen so far in the PWHL, in this era at least.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Obviously, they've got Abby Borey and Denisa Shishova. What do those pieces kind of add to that team?
Boreen was such a fun case to follow last year, because she started off as what we call a part-time player, where she could only play on 10-day contracts in the first year of the league with Minnesota, because she was finishing her schooling at the University of Minnesota, where she played with Grace Subwinkle and Taylor Heise and whatnot. They win the Walter Cup. Boreen plays a little bit. Whenever she was in the lineup, she was a difference maker. And then she enters back in the draft because that's part of the rules that if you're not a full-time player, you can go back in the draft. And she did to get drafted by Minnesota. And then Montreal picks her up. And she kind of had a weird second half of the season, but out of the gate, playing on that second line for Corey Chevry, she was dynamite. Abby Barine is one of the most underrated scorers in the league. And I would put her right now, if you're looking at that Vancouver team, she's one of probably the third best forward they got in my estimation, just based on skill alone, because how exciting of a player she is. What was the other name you mentioned? I'm sorry. I was so wrapped up in Abby Barine.
Denisa Shishova.
That was a player that we didn't know, because we didn't know how much the European game was going to really transfer. The European pro game was going to transfer to the North American game with the PWHL started. Shishova she found a way to be a good secondary scorer on that Minnesota team that for the first 2 years of its existence has found ways to be the best offensive team in the league, but then take these massive dips. And it was just this roller coaster effect. And Shishova always found a way to be a good secondary piece. If you put her with great players, because when she was playing with Zumwinkle and playing on the top six in Minnesota, she was very noticeable. I like that pickup by Morey to get a player like Shishova to kind of maybe give her more of those, top six, maybe some power play minutes, because I think she has the talent, as we've seen on the international stage, to really be a game changer.
Yeah, I definitely think both of those players are going to be huge for Vancouver. And like you said, they might be better than that Toronto team.
I know it's funny. I'm on a BC show here. I'm on a West Coast show, so I'm not going to try to be too biased. I wore a Manitoba shirt just so I could even things out a little bit. I kept my Vancouver Canucks shirt in my dresser. But I would think right now, and I know there's a lot to be done here. We have the PWHL draft coming up where teams like New York and Ottawa and Toronto, they're going to draft some really good players for this coming season. But if you were to ask me right now before the draft, and even with the players that are coming into the league through the draft next week, I would say that Vancouver right now is the best team in the league. You have Emrance Mashmeyer, who, if had it not been for Anne-Renee Desbiens, Mashmeyer would be the number one goalie for Team Canada without questions asked, right? And how important she was for the Ottawa Charge the past couple of years. You have Nurse, you have Jakes and Thompson on the back end. They just signed Teresa Venisheva from the Ottawa Charge, who is their leading scorer, and my pick to be the MVP with how the Charge ended up playing. They're just such a dominant force right now, based on what they've been able to get, and even the depth pieces that they've had to sign, because now they got to be smart with their money after signing so many star players. Vancouver just looks like it's going to be a wagon. Like, I was talking to a couple people and I'm like, this team could set the record for best winning percentage next year. I mean, the playoffs are the playoffs, because we've seen chaos. We've seen the 4 seed Minnesota the last 2 years win the Walter Cup. So we don't know how the playoffs will work. But if you're going to tell me who's going to finish first right now in the PWHL next year, it's Vancouver.
Okay, you took the question out of my mouth. That's good. I was going to ask you. Okay, let me rephrase this then. Who has a better chance of three-peating, the Florida Panthers or the Minnesota Frost?
Florida Panthers. I mean, I say that It's funny because if you asked me that question last summer, I would have said probably the same thing, because there were so many holes with Minnesota going into the playoffs in the first year. They limped their way in. They got into fourth. They were the best team in the league at the beginning of the year, and they tailed off. Similar story. They were the second best team in the league for most of the year this year, and they really tailed off. Their goaltending was subpar. Maddie Rooney and Nicole Hensley weren't the dynamic duo, but they managed to somehow win enough games, and they won enough at the right time. They beat Boston on the final day to get in the playoffs, and then they get into the playoffs. They waxed Toronto, and they beat the heck out of the Ottawa Charge. Like, Minnesota's a playoff team. I guess you could say saw that with Florida, right? They weren't that strong during the regular season, but they got into the playoffs and they beat the heck out of everybody. But with how much Minnesota has lost so far, with, like I said, Jakes and Thompson, I mean, those are probably, I think we still have to wait for the awards to come out, but that's probably the first and second best defenders in the league. I would suspect, maybe behind Renata Fost. I mean, Fost will probably win the award, but Jakes is so good. And Claire Thompson is, I mean, we've seen how great she's been with Team Canada in her first year in the PWHL. She's amazing. I just think Minnesota lost too much. And unless the goaltending bounces back next year, I think and with the way Vancouver and Seattle are looking, it's going to be much tougher for them to win it 3 years in a row.
Well, Tyler, before we let you go, I've got one more question for you, kind of touching back on the expansion stuff from the top of the show. But we talked about Calgary. That's obviously a potential place. What are some other places in Canada or in the States maybe that you could see teams going to?
Well, there's a rumor going around that the league is looking to move maybe one to get one or two again next year. We'll have to see how this year plays out. I think since the goal was to move west, I think now that we've had that, now we can look maybe back more east. Detroit's just such a hard town not to look at. They've set the U.S. professional hockey women's attendance record, not the rivalry series, not world championships, just based on PWHL or PHF numbers. They've set that record 2 years in a row now in Detroit. Logistics might be a little tough to where that team is going to play, but the passion for that in that area for that team, and maybe passion for a winning team, I think is probably maybe wants them to see maybe a women's team there. I think Detroit's up there. Edmonton was a really good crowd for their takeover game, which is why I thought it was kind of strange, because Calgary has always been the big women's hockey hotbed in terms of interest. So seeing Edmonton do really well is great. But I'm thinking if you're going to go Canada, Quebec City, that was their takeover game, Montreal and Ottawa. That was a game, I think that if I remember, it was January, February. That was a playoff game. That was loud. They filled the Videotron Center to the brim. They were hanging off the rafters to get into the rink. It was a great atmosphere. And the fact that the NHL is not going back there, if you can give them the next best option right now, the PWHL, fans will still go. People will the fact that they're going to see Marie-Philippe Poulin, whether she goes to Quebec or whether she stays in Montreal, you're going to see her 4 times a year. I mean, they will sell out. Maybe not sell out every game, but they'd probably be close to having the best attendance in the league. Them and the Laval, where the Victoire play now,
they might just actually sell out, because the Quebec Ramparts, they have a 18,000 seat arena. They put up like 9 to 11,000 every year average. So if you put a pro team in there, who knows what could happen?
They're the record for women's hockey attendance is at Centre Bell. I said this the last 2 years, if Montreal and Toronto had made it to the final, since both the Canadians and Leafs were going to be out by that point, the PWHL would have to find a way to play at Scotiabank and Bell Center. They would have 19,000 every game easily, if not more.
Mm-hmm. I got one more for you before we let you go.
Okay.
Who's the most underrated player in the PWHL?
See, maybe I'm partial because I'm a goaltender, but good thing we're talking about the expansion draft and expansion teams here. Corinne Schroeder has been just this breath of fresh air, because going into the first year of the PWHL, everyone thought, oh, the NWHL, the PHF, it was far inferior compared to what the PWHPA had. So any player coming from that league is not going to be good here. And then Corinne Schroeder, formerly of the Boston Pride, PHF goalie of the year, one of the best goalies, I think, in Canada that's not Davian or Mashmeyer, comes in and plays very well for New York, made them look like a contender. Unfortunately, her game tailed off. But when Corinne Schroeder is at her peak, she is a goaltender of the year candidate. She was the goalie of the year candidate in the first year when the Sirens finished, or when PWHL New York finished dead last. That's how good she was. And I think she still is pretty good. And getting a new start with maybe a better team in front of her in Seattle, you're going to see Corinne Schroeder be, I think, an arm and a leg better than what a lot of people think of her.
Okay. I like that. Well, man, thank you for coming on the show today. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
We are going to we'll get you back on after the draft, and we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that stuff and what we can expect from the upcoming PWHL season. But all of our viewers, you can go check out Tyler's stuff over at dailyfaceoff.com, where him and Hunter
point to it right there. You see it right there.
Yeah, right there. They do the best PWHL work in the business. I absolutely love reading their stuff every day. So they're always busy. So go check out Tyler and Hunter's stuff over at dailyfaceoff.com. And Tyler, thanks again, man. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too, guys. Talk to you soon.
Take care, Tyler.
See you guys. Thanks.
Colton. Another great one, a triple header. First triple header in the books, an hour, just over an hour. 170 people watching. We thank you for everyone tuning in. If you didn't catch the first 2 guests we had on, we got Dee Fleming, Edmonton Oil Kings play-by-play announcer, and Chase Fisher, from the Penn State Collegiate, or the Daily Collegiate, covering Penn State men's hockey. Great episode.
It's awesome. We got two big guests tomorrow. We got Zach Phillips from the Leafs Nation joining us, the producer of The Sheet as well. He's going to talk all things Mitch Marner, and I'm probably going to piss him off with a couple comments. So it should be a great episode. That one will be not live, though, everybody. That one will be pre-recorded. Zach, of course, has to produce The Sheet kind of when we go live, so he's a bit busy. So that one will be pre-recorded, but we're still going live at 11 o'clock, and then we will bring on Brad Schlossman from the Grand Forks Herald, where he covers the University of North Dakota. And we will talk about Cole Reshny and Keaton Verhoff and what UND's landscape is looking like moving forward in the college hockey world.
All right, fellas. Well, thank you for all tuning in tonight. If you haven't, go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to get the audio versions of our podcast. And we will see you right back here tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on GDT Live.